I think it's really important for people who are uncomfortable with the status quo to continue working in those industries, otherwise nothing changes.
Welcome to the latest instalment of the Positive Disruptor, where I speak to founders and business leaders who are transforming their sector for the better. Today my guest is Charli Cohen, the self-styled Bruce Wayne of fashion. Charli founded her first fashion brand at the age of 15 and went on to found 3 more, including her technical fashion brand before the age of 30. What's more, through her own experiences, Charli's been championing mental health awareness amongst the creative industries through her Shades of Blue platform. Well, thank you so much, Charli, for joining me today. I am very excited to be chatting with you.
Thank you, and thank you for that wonderful intro.
My pleasure. Now, we have to start with this self-styled Bruce Wayne of fashion that you have put on your Twitter bio. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that description of yourself.
As you mentioned in the intro, I started in this industry when I was 15, so 17, close to 17 years. I have become increasingly uncomfortable with it, but I think it's really important for people who are uncomfortable with the status quo to continue working in those industries, otherwise nothing changes. So I see myself as being this, undercover vigilante who is trying to make things right.
Although you may feel uncomfortable in it, you persevere, and I think that's really important. And now, having spoken to a lot of positive disruptors in this series, this seems to be a common theme with founders like yourselves being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about yourself like that. Now, I feel like we have to go back to the beginning, because as well as all the things that you've been doing around fashion, it's quite extraordinary at such a young age that clearly you are a designer, but you're a personal trainer, a nutritionist. You co-founded That Girl London. You've done an awful lot very early on in your journey. It'd be great just to hear a little bit about, from your perspective, how it all started.
So when I was 13, I sailed with my mum and stepdad in a converted fishing boat from the UK to New Zealand, which was an 18-month trip, and one where I had a lot of time to write and draw and think about how I saw the next few years panning out. And during that time, I did a lot of designing. And when I arrived in New Zealand, where we subsequently lived for a number of years, I decided that fashion was the career I wanted to pursue, and the best way to get a grounding in it was to start a business and just figure out how it all worked.
Wow, definitely a different type of path to many. But I'm just love to understand a little bit as well about your sort of parents, the influences in your life early on, because given everything's happened so early on for you in your journey, like what role did your parents play, or were there other people playing a big part in kind of making you believe that you could do some of these things?
So I was very fortunate in that my parents and all of my immediate family really are entrepreneurs and business owners. So that was absolutely the environment I was brought up in, and it never crossed my mind that I would do anything other than start my own business. It was really a case of figuring out what that was going to be. My parents and my grandmother as well were in this sort of antiques and arts industry, still are. So there was definitely a lot of creative inputs.
So if we come back to kind of more present day and the Charli Cohen brand, when you go on your website, you obviously refer to yourself at building NEXTWEAR. Like, for average people like myself, what is NEXTWEAR?
It's something that you can wear in real life to represent yourself, but it extends into everywhere that you exist in the digital world. So we do that through digital product and skins and AR filters, and we also do it through building out these bigger stories around product. Maybe,
Charli, it'd be good if you could bring that to life. So myself as a consumer, I buy one of the items, and then what does that look? What happens next?
So a collaboration that we did recently was with Assassin's Creed, and those garments were AR enabled. So somebody is wearing, say, our jacket, they can point a smartphone camera at it, We did integrate this with the snap camera. So they open Snapchat, point the snap camera at it, and it unlocks this experience that comes from the Assassin's Creed game. It's like a 3D animation around the customer wearing their garment, which they're then able to share across social media.
When was that moment where you saw that opportunity, that connection between the different industries, and why?
I think fashion is one of the key ways in which people express their identity. Gaming is also a way that people are very active in expressing their identities through customizing avatars, through using skins, and gaming is, of course, now a really important place where people socialize. So, a lot of socialization has moved from the physical world into the gaming world, but you still want to be able to take your physical and aesthetic identity with you into that world. So that's where there's this really, really cool link between fashion and gaming. It's just being able to be yourself in whatever environment you're existing in and socializing in.
You look at so many businesses that are having to kind of rethink the way they do things because they've started with more of a traditional business, where you have just completely almost reset what fashion could look like in a virtual and physical world. So when you think about yourself as this positive disruptor, like, did you mean for yourself to be that, or did it sort of just happen based on a vision you had?
I think it's always very much just happened, and it's been like sometimes a blessing, sometimes a curse, that throughout my experience in fashion especially, I've been early to various sectors of the market, sometimes too early, so that it hasn't been able to be as successful as someone who came in with a lot of money later on. But in terms of the bridging out further into the digital virtual side, we started really pushing the business in that direction in 2019. So of course, coming into 2020 with the pandemic, the business was in a brilliant position to continue to grow and progress through this crazy time that we're in, whereas the traditional fashion industry has been absolutely wrecked by what's been going on.
And when did you start to sort of see this connection or feel this connection between fashion and technology? Because you talk a lot about having creativity as part of your upbringing and influencing you, but the tech bit isn't something you reference so much when you talk about your journey, but clearly it's a massive part of what you do today in terms of those connections between fashion and tech. So where did the tech piece come into it?
I think it started when I was in my teens. I started building out a presence on social media and doing digital marketing for other companies. So that was back in 2007, 2008, where it was still quite early days, and just realized the potential of purely digital marketing through social media. So it's always been something that was very interesting. And then just the aesthetic of the brand very much references gaming culture, and is quite futuristic. So I suppose that's something that I've always immersed myself in as well from an inspiration creative perspective. So I think it was just a very natural direction for us to go in.
Now, we have to we'll talk about the pandemic that we're all living through. And it'd be good to understand, you touched on already in terms of tech and how you've been sort of more set up in a better way than maybe other businesses to cope with the pandemic. But if you could talk a little bit about the impact it's had on your business, the good and the bad, I suppose.
From the, traditional fashion side, sales, wholesale sales especially, all the wholesale orders we had were cancelled. And sales of physical product definitely were moving slower. But the amount of opportunity that we've had through the pandemic, because of operating more in this technical crossover space, the companies, especially like gaming industry, who we're partnering with, there is so much appetite to be doing these types of collaboration that don't rely on physical location, physical events, and that's something that we were already set up to be offering. So it really was a catalyst for the growth of the tech side of our business. And that's been really exciting, really transformative. So from that perspective, I know that I'm going to look back and be grateful that I was able to get those opportunities during this time.
And let's try and imagine a world where we are out of the pandemic, back to a relatively kind of what we would class as normality. What impact do you think, the lasting impact it's going to have on the fashion industry?
It's created so much upheaval. It's pretty much sort of killed seasonal collections. It's had a huge impact on the traditional wholesale model, and the issue of overproduction and waste. So my hope is that there is less seasonality, there's less overproduction, there's more responsive production, and that the fashion industry are able to learn from this. Like, first of all, they've been forced into using new methods and new strategies, which are all things that should have happened years and years ago. The fashion industry is very, very slow compared to other industries. So they've been forced to try them. They'll hopefully see that actually it works better, not just from a sustainability perspective, but also from their bottom line, which is really what's going to direct them. And that we will see a lot of positive change on that side.
Yeah, and I find it really fascinating because I think not just fashion, so many industries have been forced to rethink how they operate. And actually, I'm pretty optimistic. I think post-pandemic that I think some good is going to come out of this in terms of how we accelerate, how we operate, and truly add further value to customers and consumers. So I'm trying to be the optimistic person in all of the doom and gloom, because I think being forced to make changes can be a really great thing for everyone.
I really agree. I think also it's helped to further democratize the industry, because now brands are having to create online globally accessible experiences, rather than it just being these exclusive events that only the same set of people can come to again and again. So that's exciting as well.
What I really do respect about the way you talk is just your openness and honesty. You have done an awful lot around mental health awareness in the creative industries, and you've been very open about the fact you have struggled in that area. So can you talk a little bit about the Shades of Blue platform, and a little bit why that was so important for you, as well as obviously you've experienced it, but to give back essentially?
So, my history, I had anorexia through most of my teens. I've suffered from depression for most of my life. So it's something that's ever present for me. And these are all things that you don't ever really recover from. You just learn to manage it, and learn to keep on a level. So that experience was already very naturally informing how I created, the stories I wanted to tell. And in my own experience, I found it was always really helpful to just hear from other people who had gone through the same things. There's obviously, it's nice to have the diagnosis and science and so on and so forth, but really the most reassuring thing is knowing that other people have experienced what you've experienced and they've found ways to cope with it. So I wanted to be able to offer that kind of reassurance in any way that I could through my own platform, and Shades of Blue really was the way to properly integrate that into the Charli Cohen brand. So it's looking especially at issues within the creative industries. They tend to be, it's an industry that tends to attract vulnerable people, because art and creativity is often an outlet that's used to manage mental health struggles. And that being said, the creative industries are also generally very poorly set up to support those people. It's sort of rife with unpaid internships, ridiculous hours, really aggressive competition, and also often this glamorization of the struggling artist. So you almost feel that you have to be suffering to be authentic. And I felt there was a need to focus on raising awareness and building a community within the creative industries specifically because of that.
And do you think from you personally, obviously the success you've had, has that had a positive impact on you and helped you kind of move forward with your own struggles? Or do you, I mean, you touched on still having to manage it, it doesn't just go away, but I suppose has your success helped you sort of stay kind of day to day, kind of, I suppose, more kind of positive about your own life?
I don't know if it even comes into it. I mean, you know, depression is a funny one because, you know, you can be, everything can be great in terms of your circumstances in your life, and you can still get depressed because it's a chemical thing. So I find that nowadays, you know, I think more so to do with antidepressants, therapy, the wide range of both like pharmaceutical and alternative therapies that I use to manage it have helped my lows be less low. But I don't know if success really makes a dent in it.
I think it's so true what you're saying, because I always think about when people ask you how you are during kind of the pandemic and obviously in the UK and lockdown, and you feel this sort of sense you have to say, I'm great, I've got my home, but actually it doesn't make it any easier just because, you know, maybe we're in a more privileged position and so on. It's still tough.
No, and then you have the guilt associated with it as well, because you feel like, oh, I'm not entitled to feel like this, and it's a whole nother layer of issue that you have to deal with.
It's really true. It's really true. So moving forward, I keep trying to get us back out of the pandemic, and you look at your kind of the future in the next 12 months. What's planned for Charli Cohen?
So we are really leaning into this extended reality product now. So we're going to be doing a lot with digital fashion and NFTs, with game skins. We're working with some incredible gaming IPs over the next year doing these extended reality product collaborations. So yes, that's going to be the real focus. And hopefully at the end of the year we'll be running some events, mixed reality and virtual reality events as well, which will be really fun.
So if you could look back at, you know, your career so far, because I think you've still got an awful lot, I can only imagine what you're going to do in the future, but looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
I don't think there is anything I could have done differently to be better prepared for sort of being in this right time now for what I'm doing, I guess. So whilst I wish that everything could have moved you know, much faster, it wouldn't have made a difference because the timing wouldn't have been right.
Now, I always want to end each episode on a positive. So what would be your sort of lasting tips for people sitting watching this episode and going, I want to be like Charli Cohen? What would be your sort of top tips?
I think honing your gut instinct is really important because as soon as you start something, everyone that you know and probably plenty of people you don't know will want to put in their 2 cents and their input on it. And you just have to be able to really aggressively filter what's helpful to you and what doesn't sit right with you. And especially, you know, if you're going into an industry that you're disrupting and you're speaking to people who've been in that particular industry for 20 years, although it seems like they have great experience, you have to think about how relevant is that experience, because I'm trying to change what the industry's been doing for the last 20 years. And yeah, it's having the gut instinct and that kind of inner confidence to be able to discount advice when you need to and figure out what makes sense for you.
A huge thank you, Charli, for your time. I think it's definitely fair to say your gut instinct is working very well for you, given that we're living through a lot of the vision that you've had for your business from many years ago. And I am so excited to see what you continue to do to make such a positive impact on the industry you're in. So thank you.
Thank you so much.